Let's go!
G'day guys, a lot of people have been asking me to give my early thoughts on 10th edition, so I thought I'd do a real quick video just sharing sort of some of my predictions, some of my thoughts and some of my feelings around this new announced edition that we've got coming out for competitive Warhammer 40k. So one of the first things I want to say is that it's obviously way too early to make any predictions on anything really substantial, so it's too early to be commenting on whether or not this game is going to be better or worse, whether it's going to be more or less balanced, whether it's going to be more or less simple. All of these things, it's way too early to make a claim on. Now, I've been playing 40k for like 15 to 20 years now. I've gone through several edition changes, and one of the things that I've learned is that it's never wise to make any bold predictions until you have all of the rules in your hand. And GW have gotten really, really good at stirring up controversy and stirring up, a lot of very powerful opinions by people in the community by drip feeding out rules before a codex or before an edition that'll get people up in arms. And it'll get people to start making these very strong claims, even though they don't have all of the information. So an example for this could be, we now know that they're getting rid of objective secured, and they're replacing that with this new trait on a datasheet called OC for objective control. So there's some people that will say, oh, this is amazing because objective secured was silly when you had like one, guardsman steal an objective out of underneath the Imperial Knight. Like, that's just silly. So they're saying it's an objectively good change. And then there's other people that think, well, hang on, that this now devalues troops, and it means that, it's going to be way easier to block off objectives and prevent your opponent from being able to score victory points because, now getting one guardsman on an objective might not ever really mean anything in the grand scheme of things, because if your opponent's got a vehicle on it, you need to get lots of guardsmen on it in order to cancel out the vehicle. And vehicles often have big bases, which means you're not going to be able to get lots of models on the objective, which means big things like an Imperial Knight, they might be able to just hold an objective and not be able to have it taken from them. So this is why I think it's not wise at this stage to make comments on whether or not something like that is a good thing for the game. You really need to wait until you've got all of the rules in your hands before you make these claims. You actually almost need to wait for like a couple of months after the games come out before you can really make any solid like criticisms or celebrations on the status of these changes, because we just don't know at this stage how broken or how solid they're going to be. And in my experience, in every single edition change has been an absolute clusterfuck when it first comes out. And I say that in a positive way, right? Like, it's a clusterfuck. I enjoy the clusterfuck. I really enjoyed 8th edition when that first came out. It was like the Wild West, no one knew what anything was. It was a free-for-all. There was all these options available. Everything was new and exciting. I absolutely loved 8th edition launch. And I felt similar around like 6th edition when 6th first came out, sorry. It was similar, not quite the same, but it was very similar in that we just had this whole new plethora of rules and all this new stuff, and we had flyers come out, which was a completely new mechanic in the game, and we had all this crazy shit. It's a really good, fun time to be involved in 40k, and I know a lot of people out there started playing 40k in 8th edition. There was a huge spike for GW. So there's probably a lot of people, potentially even a lot of the people listening to this, that have never been through that dramatic of an edition change. So yeah, I think you're all in for a treat. It's a lot of fun. It can be quite jarring, and there will absolutely, on release, there will be things about this new edition that are fucking broken as hell. So to give some context for that, in early 8th edition when that first came out, you used to be able to bring a unit called a Malefic Lord, which was a 30-point character who could do smite. And this is before smites got harder the more you cast. So you'd just bring like 9 of them, and there was no rule of 3 either. So you just bring like 9 of these guys, you bring 3 detachments with 3 HQs in each, and you'd bring all these guys, and then you'd put them behind like an ocean of cultists. And this was back when coherency didn't have the whole within 2 inches of 2 models restriction. And also, if you removed casualties and you were no longer within coherency, it just meant you couldn't move. So what people were doing, or what I was doing, was I'd bring like 200 cultists, and I'd put 1 on this objective, and then I'd string out to an objective all the way across the other side of the board. And then as I was forced to remove casualties, I just removed them from the middle. And I was like, I don't plan on moving this cultist unit anyway. It's on the objectives I want. And you just do that. And it was so ridiculous. And then meanwhile, you've got all these malefic lords just putting out massive amounts of mortal wounds. And there was nothing your opponent could do to stop you. It was ridiculous. And that's just one of the, the many very, very silly, powerful builds that came out of early edition stuff. And that's because GW, like, they'll do their best to test it, but there's nothing says, well tested like an edition that's been out for 6 months, and you've had literally the entire world trying as hard as they can to break the edition. That's what makes the edition strong. So all those people out there that complain about power gamers, you actually owe power gamers the success of the edition, because they're the ones that go out there and find all the problems and fix them. But yeah, so that's sort of where I'm at when it comes to this new edition. I'm very excited. I think it's going to be a shit ton of fun, and I'm very optimistic as well, because I think with each new edition that GW has released, they have gotten a little bit better. They've refined their philosophy. They've understood what the customer wants more. They're getting better at engaging with the community, so they're getting more feedback. So I'm optimistic. I think this edition will be good. But at the same time, I'm not as confident as some, and I'm fully prepared for this to come out and for there to be several parts of it that are just broken. I guess one of my biggest concerns is that they've said that part of their philosophy is simplified but not simple, which kind of doesn't make any sense, right? Because to simplify something is to make it simple. I guess they mean to make it a little bit more simple, but one of my challenges is they've mentioned, like, for example, each faction is only going to get 2 pages worth of rules. And it's like, how do you fit an entire faction's worth of character in 2 pages? Unless they're going to put lots of information on the data sheets. But let's take World Eaters as a case study. The Blood Tithe mechanic in the current rule set is 2 pages itself, just for the Blood Tithe mechanic. So when you're releasing a new faction, like, how are you going to give it enough character? And this is even more compounded for things like Tyranids, for example, where they've got multiple different hive fleets, they've got all this different crazy stuff. Like, is all of that just gone now? And is the hive fleet just a color scheme? Or are they going to make it, interesting and have, ways to make your army's character come through for your specific army, as opposed to just being a Tyranids player who plays Tyranids, I'm concerned that this push towards simplification is going to result in significantly less customization. And I don't think customization was ever really the problem. And that's one of my concerns. So I'm more than happy to be wrong on this one. But yeah, I worry that we're heading into a new edition where things are going to be ridiculously simple and straightforward. And to be fair, when 8th edition first came out, it was very simple. There were no Legion traits. There were no, sub-factions or anything like that. There was very few stratagems. Like, there was only like 4 stratagems in the whole game when 8th edition first came out. But that was quickly rectified with codexes, right? As soon as the codexes started coming out, they became really, really powerful. And that was another challenge which TOs are going to have to wrap their head around, is if it's anything like 8th edition, what happened with 8th edition is everything got an index, everything got reset. But then as codexes came out, those codexes were so much more powerful than the indexes, because the indexes didn't have relics and didn't have all the warlord traits, didn't have all the stratagems. So, when Chaos Space Marines are playing with their index, going up against loyalists with their codex, it was chalk and cheese. There was no chance the Chaos Space Marines were going to be able to compete on even footing. So it'd be interesting to see how GW tackle that, whether or not we have to go through another year of wild imbalance between armies that have codexes versus armies that do not. But part of the codexes being a 2-page rule set means maybe there won't be that big of a difference. Like, how big of an impact can 2 rules really have? Like 2 pages really have? But yeah, it'll be interesting to see, like, how do they fit, taking it back to the World Eaters, how do they fit, like, the Blood Tithe mechanic and the Disciples of the Red Angels and the World Eaters and, all of the faction special rules? How do they fit all of that on 2 pages? My guess is they're going to put more of these sorts of special rules on the unit's data sheets, and then probably rely more heavily on universal special rules, so that they can abbreviate things and make things shorter, so that they can put it all on the in 2 pages. So instead of writing out an entire legion trait, they might just say, fucking, this legion gains these 2 USRs. One of them might be reroll 1s to hit, one of them might be +1 to fucking, whatever, exploding 6s to hit. So they might just put that abbreviated on a couple pages, and that way you've got, here's your rules, and then you reference the core rulebook for your details. That would be interesting. And yeah, like I said, I'm really excited. I think all of these changes are good. They're good for new players because it sort of gives them an opportunity to be on equal footing with somebody who's experienced and has been playing the game for years. But it's also good for, your experienced players, because they get a fresh set of rules that they get to play with, so they get a sort of a revitalization of their game. And they also get an opportunity to showcase their ability to problem solve rapidly. And I think ultimately one of the things I've noticed over the years is that the players that are at the top of the pile in terms of tournament results, they consistently remain at the top, even through edition changes. And I think that's because and it actually is more profound and more noticeable at the start of an edition than towards the end. And I think that's because one of the key skills that's required to perform well at tournaments is the ability to rapidly problem solve, whether that be on the tabletop during a game when your opponent gives you a challenge you need to solve, or the dice do something to you which results in you being in a specific situation that you need to come up with a solution to. You need to be able to rapidly problem solve, or whether it be, as the meta shifts, you need to be able to analyze the meta and make good decisions there and solve that problem. Or whether it be when it comes time to just like writing your list and planning out things. Like, either way, these are all just problem solving skills. It's just an exercise in problem solving. So if you're able to problem solve rapidly and you're very good at that skill, you're very good at identifying challenges and coming up with creative solutions to them. If that's one of the things that you're skilled at, well then you're going to do really, really well at tournaments. And at new edition, you're going to be able to really flex that muscle and sort of wield that skill to your advantage. Whereas there's some players out there where their skill might not necessarily be rapid problem solving. Their skill might be that they're really good at remembering things and they don't forget stuff. Like, for example, I like to think I'm pretty good at the rapid problem solving stuff, but when it comes time to remembering things, I'm really bad. So I'll forget my rules, I'll forget things, I'll forget opportunity. So it's like I've come up with all these solutions, but then executing the solutions can sometimes be where I slip up. Whereas other players, they're really good at execution, but they're not great at the creative side of things. They're not great at coming up with the solutions. They're not great at writing lists. They're not great at, analyzing things. They're just really good at, you give them a good list, and they're just really good at the execution side of things. So those people tend to thrive later in the edition. Whereas people who are good at the problem solving and are good at those sorts of challenges, they thrive at the start of the edition. So it's an exciting time to be one of those people, which I think obviously everybody has to a degree, but it's something that, it's one of my favorite parts of 40k is that, that challenge where it's like, okay, here's a whole new rule set, figure it out. Even when like Arcs of Omen dropped, you can even look at it on a micro scale and go, cool, when a new season of 40k drops, you need to be able to go, okay, cool, well, what has functionally changed? What's the implications? How's that going to impact the meta? And what are you going to do about it? So that's when I took the Black Legion and I decided to pivot and put Hellbrutes in there, 3 Hellbrutes. And everyone was like, what are you talking about, 3 Hellbrutes? Like a lot of my mates, when I told them the list I was bringing to the championships, they're like, what the fuck, Hellbrutes? They're bad. And I was like, no, you're bad. Because you're misunderstanding that Arcs of Omen bringing strat reserves in for free is a big functional change in the way the game is going to play, and being able to bring in these 105 point little guys that punch the fuck out of things and bring on melter guns and can come on from table edges is just really, really good. And I'm like, trust me, the things like Hellbrutes with their biggest weakness being things like movement characteristic, well, that weakness is now no longer really relevant. So being able to look at it, and then I went pretty well with I've gone pretty well with the Hellbrutes since then. So it was a good rapid change, and now other people are bringing Hellbrutes to their lists, and they're noticing the same thing. And it's because that they're probably people that are not as rapid at the problem solving, but they're really good at the execution side of things. So that sort of change is the exciting part of the new meta, and it also gives you an opportunity to get new models, build your collection. Some people will complain, oh, now I have to run out and buy new stuff, and it's like, no. This game is fundamentally a collector's game, right? You collect models, and then the game is to play with those models. You shouldn't view it as here is the game that I now need to go out and buy equipment to play. You should be like, I've bought all this sick equipment and now I get to play a game with it. The game is the driving force behind what you buy, but fundamentally you're buying things because you want them. So I like that, and I'm excited to continue to expand my collection into this new edition. And I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic for the future, but I'm also realistic and understand that on release it's probably going to be a shit show. We're probably going to end up finding that there's, one thing like Horde might be completely over fucking powered, and we're just going to see Horde armies everywhere for the first few months, and then, things will change and there'll be, regular balance updates, etc. But, yeah, so that's my sort of first thoughts. So I'm assuming there's going to be plenty of, new information coming out on a very rapid pace for the next couple of months. They'll probably bring out something new every couple of days, and I'm not going to respond to every new release, every new rumor that comes out, every new release by GW, because that'd be kind of exhausting, and there's already plenty of channels out there doing that, so you don't need my sort of take on it. Unless, of course, I have a particularly interesting or controversial take, then I'll do a video. Or if there's any specific questions that you guys have that you'd like to hear me comment on, then by all means, chuck it in the comments of this video and I'll get right on it. But yeah, ultimately, I think it's going to be a sick edition, and we'll just sort of take it piece by piece as it comes out. Alright guys, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed that video, or if you enjoyed my other videos, make sure to head over to blog.fullofbloodgod.com and show your support over there. You can pick up merchandise, you can join our Patreon, you can join our Discord. There's all kinds of cool shit you can do over on my website. So with that being said, I'm going to leave it here. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.
stronger than the Black God.